Hello and welcome to Hanratty on Karate. In the last podcast I was a little bit rambling on the broader strokes of the history of karate and the various personalities that were involved. I'd like to narrow that down a little bit today and concentrate mainly on the formation of karate in North America. Now, before the JKA was formed, as I said earlier, the occupation forces grew very interested in Japanese martial arts, in particular in karate, basically as a physical exercise and as a method of self-defense, which they felt they'd need. So, on the introduction of karate to North America, and I'm going by conversations I had with a good friend of mine who passed away a few years ago, Sensei Hanratty. Randy was the president of the American Shotokan Karate Association and also president of the AJKA, American JKA Karate Association. And both of these organizations were formed later on as an offshoot of karate in the US, of the major groups in the US, particularly ISKF and Nishiyama's AAKF. But going back to the early 50s, well, actually, if you go back, according to Randy, the first dojo was opened in Phoenix, Arizona in 1948 by a guy called Robert Trias. Now, this wasn't Shotokan, it was a style that was developed by Onishi, Kyokan system. They was taught in that area then, and in 54, another person started teaching, I think his name was Galudis, on the East Coast. And in 55, Ed Parker of the Kempo group opened the first West Coast karate studio in Pasadena. And then we have Oshima, who was an exchange student from Waseda University, opened the Shotokan Karate Dojo in Los Angeles. So Oshima founded Shotokan Karate of America in LA. So there was various styles coming in about this time. There was even some Korean version of karate, Taekwondo, by Jun Ree. He opened up in San Marco, Texas. So, as you can see, it started off quite early, even before the formation of the JKA. A lot of styles were coming in. Uechiru, George Mattson started in 58. After training during tours of Okinawa. In 59, Hiroshi Orito, second-dan exchange student from Keio, began teaching Funakoshi's karate in New York. And Peter Urban, Gogen Yamaguchi's student, began teaching Goju-Ryu in New Jersey. But the biggest year for the expansion of karate into the North America was probably 1960. We have an influx of different karate styles opening up all over the place. And not all by Japanese practitioners, some by returning servicemen who'd studied for a number of years, and some by people who had come in, like Fumio Demura came into Santa Ana in 65. We have a Chito-Ryu style. William Demetric in 67 came into Kentucky, and quite a number of all those. Now, there was a tour group that was given an overwhelming reception in 53, and also the JKA had proceeded to prepare instructors for establishments of their American branch. So, in 61, Okazaki, probably considered one of the best technical karate men, arrived in Philadelphia. He was the first official JKA instructor in the US. And then later, just a few months later, we had Nishiyama coming into LA. They were forming their own branches then. So the problem, I think Okazaki was only sent over initially for a period of 6 months and told to establish a Japan organization, a Japan karate organization. But the thing was, he was only given 6 months to do it, and he didn't speak a word of English. But they had Mr. Sugiura He was a second dan from KO, helped as an interpreter when he could, and eventually he married an American lady, I think her name was Linda, and they got along a little better. So some of Okazaki's students was Leslie Safar, and we also had Robert Fazaro in Minneapolis, who'd been one of the earliest students of JKA. So the organization that Okazaki started was ISKF. So he went from a small club in Philadelphia into an international organization. It's big. It's in Canada, Mexico, South America, and the West Indies. I don't think there's too many ISKF in Europe. Whereas Nishiyama's group, which is now ITKF, I believe, it's changed quite a number of times, is pretty much worldwide. But as we'll find out later, they all split from the JKA pretty much over the years because, and this is just my opinion, like we have had so many splits with Kanazawa's group, Nishiyama's group, Okazaki's group, and so many of them splitting up. And the offshoots from them, they split up. And it was purely, I think, not the technical side of karate that caused these splits, but the administrative side of it and the greed that come with, let's face it. I remember Leslie Safar telling me a story of, he took Okazaki to a grading, I can't remember where it was, and there were so many people grading there. Now, at that time, you could only be graded by a Japanese instructor, and this became a bone of contention later on. But you could only be graded by a Japanese instructor, and they set the prices. And I believe they bought the certificates from the JKA, ready signed, and then they just filled the names in, sent the numbers back to the JKA. I'm not sure how that worked, but as far as I knew, that was it. So I remember Leslie Safar saying they'd went to a grading, and they came back with a briefcase full of cash from this grading. And that happened every 3-4 months. And that was the way that karate was organized at the time. So even as it was spreading amongst the population of North America, and it was spreading, you had Sugiyama, even people who weren't a graduate in the instructor's program, but nevertheless were quite respected. They founded strong organizations. Sugiyama in Chicago, and he's written some books, and I've met Sugiyama, he's a nice man. He's got some different ideas, but he's got some well-known students. Ted Headland's one of his students. Ted Headland's a very good friend of mine and one of the highest-ranking officials in the world. Has his name on in the JKA headquarters in Tokyo. So all of these people kind of flooded in. You had Koyama in Arizona, Kisaka in New Jersey, Takashima in Florida, Ueki was also in Florida. And I heard other people who had a lot of experience. So one guy who kind of kept out of the limelight of the JKA, although he was JKA member, was Ozawa in Nevada, in Las Vegas. Ozawa never got involved in too much in the politics. He just liked to do his karate. But he was very successful. He has one of the most successful tournaments in the world until his passing. His student, James Tuatas, carries it on. But notable names, say, from the California area were Ray Dalkey and Frank Smith, James Yabbie, James Field. Then you had the East Coast with Leslie Safar, Ronald Johnson, Gerald Evans, and you had Gray Golden in Ohio, Robert Graves in Oregon. All of these were long-time students and studied hard. In particular, the California group under Nishiyama, because Nishiyama tried to institute an instructor's program on the lines of the Japanese, the JKA instructor's program, which was worldwide famous and feared. I mean, these were guys who were training daily, every day, 7 days a week, sometimes 3-4 times a day. Now, not everybody is capable of doing that, either physically, emotionally, or financially. But I remember Ray telling me you had to show up at Nishiyama's dojo for 9 o'clock in the morning in a shirt and tie. If you went there at 9 o'clock, you didn't get in. And that's the way he ran his instructor's program. In the instructor's program, they also had to submit a written paper every month on various subjects that were given out. And Ray's contention was that the book Nishiyama and Richard Brown put out, a very famous karate book, one of the first textbooks called This is Karate, he said that was probably the product of all of the papers that they submitted to Nishiyama for his instructor's program. So why the JKA instructor's program came about, and this was from Nishiyama himself, and also admitted by Nakayama in several interviews, was the fact that they were teaching Westerners brought something to light that they'd never really considered when they were doing their own training. Westerners wanted to know why they were doing it. Japanese just did it because they did as they were told. So they had to analyze why. And this brought under the spotlight many aspects of karate that weren't quite relevant to the Japanese and the Okinawans who did it. They just did as they were told, did their kata, did the drills and everything else, and never asked why. They just wanted to get better at doing it. And the Americans wanted to know why they were doing it. And so they had to kind of get a little bit more technical with the physiology, the body mechanics, and just basic body functions and how it works, leverage, just the mechanics behind it. And this shows in the aforementioned book, This is Karate by Nishiyama and Brown. So to get back to the organizations, now Nishiyama was a very political animal. I interviewed Nishiyama for hours and hours, and it was obvious he's a political animal. He wanted to form karate. He wanted to get it into the Olympics. Now, his first step of getting it into the Olympics was getting it into the American Amateur Athletics Union. And he managed to do this basically through the help of Dick Allen. Dick Allen was quite dominant in the U.S. Business field, and he had a lot of contacts and everything else. And he managed to do it. So he was a member of the AAU. However, he's kind of like a dog in a manger. He wanted to push other organizations out. He didn't want them included unless you became a member of the AAU. And if you weren't doing the karate exactly the way he thought it should be done, then you didn't get membership, even though he said it was an open organization to all styles. Basically, a couple of letters he wrote really didn't reflect that opinion. And so people became, a little bit suspicious of what he was doing. At one time, it looked like he might get into the 76 Olympics in Montreal, but it didn't materialize. And the more almost dictatorial they got, the more they alienated other groups. And they all felt this and felt that they didn't want to be part of the AAKF, which was Nishiyama's organization at the time. And this is where you started to get some splits. They didn't want other organizations in. In 71, the AAU reached an agreement with the AAKF, which was Nishiyama's body, that they should be the underlying body for karate. But in 75, it kind of started to fall away. And it's continued to fall away for several reasons. One of the first splits was a group called WUKO, and we can understand why. There's two kind of splits you got to look at here. One is the administrative split, where one group wants to control everything on the administrative level, and the other kind of split is on the technical level, where the Japanese view was Westerners could never quite reach the technical level that they required to give gradings or to pass shodans. And this is still prevalent in a lot of organizations, because stating who is at what level is quite a step in most organizations. And also, it's a financial thing, because just about everybody charges for gradings, and they charge for people to be accepted as shodans, nidans, whatever. And so whoever puts out these gradings, first of all, you want to make sure that the people that you're grading are of sufficient technical knowledge to reflect the standards of your organization. Now, I'm very picky on that, but I do allow people that have come up through our instructors' courses and of a sufficient level downgrade to grade. I'm not going to let anybody grade. That would seriously dissipate the level that I'm looking for, that I want reflective of our organization. And I believe JKA and everybody else does too, but it doesn't reflect in the way that they allow people to grade. For example, at the time that the AJKA split with ISKF, they had people there who'd been training for 25 years, like Ray Dalkey, Leslie Safar, Randy Hassel, for example. So they split with ISKF, which was a member of the JKA, and later on the ISKF split with the JKA as well. But they split with that, and then immediately got a letter back from Okazaki. Not the administrative side of the ISKF, but from the technical side, Okazaki supposedly stripped them of all their ranks and stand-in. Now, I don't know how you can do that. I've had people leave my dojo, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th downs, and, okay, we're going to start something on our own. Fine, go for it. You can't take somebody's training from them, right? If they've managed to get up to the grade that they have and you recognized it, you can't recognize it one day and not recognize it another day, you know? I know there's early stories of a couple of 5th dans from the US going over to Japan and asking could they train, and they were told they'd have to grade. And when they did grade, they only got something like an 8th Q. Maybe that's what they want, but you understand that if they're being graded, I mean, I don't know what the test comprised of or what they were asked to do or anything else, but it quite an insult, and they went away again. They felt they didn't need the JKA's permission to be the grade that they were, and this is prevalent throughout, right? But anyway, that's what happened with the ISKF. They just summarily stripped all of these people of their grades, and the letter that Ray Dalkey and Leslie Safar had sent to the JKA asking to be affiliated was rejected out of hand because Okazaki had more or less put the word in. So that was that, and they went on. So the two reasons people split, one is, as I say, administrative, and the other technical. Now, Okazaki, in my opinion, didn't have the authority to summarily strip people of their grades. Should have been like letters, a meeting of the board of directors or whatever, and there was nothing there. Anyway, that's the way that was, and it leaves a lot of bad feeling, as a lot of these splits do. They leave a lot of bad feelings. Anyway, as I say, there's a lot of money involved in gradings, and I've just remembered that I think it was Puerto Rico that Okazaki went with Leslie Safar to do a grading and came back with a suitcase full of money, which is pretty good incentive to keep a lid on who grades and who doesn't grade. So that was that. Now, unfortunately, what happens, and I've found this to be true time and time again, people will complain about how the Japanese behave with regards to running an organization, dictatorial and overbearing and, changing the rules to suit them. But then immediately they start their own organization, you get exactly the same thing happening. It's almost like they follow a pattern that has been laid down for them. I know every organization that I've ever seen start up says it wants to promote unity in karate and we should all be one good, happy family. That's what they all say, but the minute you get the politics involved or you get some board of directors or wherever, that's when it all rears its ugly head and goes back to square one. So what can I tell you? I honestly think that karate belongs in the dojo, on the floor. You do what you do. You try to make yourself a better person. Belonging to any organization, no matter how elite you think it is, basically you're looking for glory by association. You can admire the leaders and the followers, and I've seen some of the best karate men in the world, and I mean people who know what they're doing and can do it and got nothing to prove. my opinion, the best karate person I've ever seen in the world was Frank Brennan. Still going good. I won't change my mind about that. I've seen lots of people. I've trained with lots of people. I've sparred with lots of people. And I think technically, if you take the politics out of it, the best teacher I ever had was Nishiyama. If you go for spirit, the best example you ever have was Onoida. So you can pick your heroes how you want, but you don't want to idolize them. Put them up against a mirror and have a look at them. And believe me, if you've been doing karate as long as I have, 50, 55 years, you've got something to be proud of, just as much as they are. Maybe I can't do it as good as I used to, but I can do it as good as I can. And that's what I try. Anyway, have a good day. Any comments, really welcome. I'll talk to you all later. Bye now.